to Justice Quest.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Justice Quest. This is the show where we are unabashedly call for the execution of people who are trying to change America from what it was into what they want it to be. This is the show where your host is tired of being polite. Your host is tired of being reasonable. You know, we're outright getting ticked off here. As a taxpayer, we're getting tired of funding all these evil, and I say evil, mandates that come down the road. You know, Monday we talked about Congress and how they went ahead and they are not abiding by their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. I'm going to go ahead and read this to you, because as we covered Ecclesiastes 5:4, when you make an oath to the Lord, do not go ahead and hesitate in paying it. But first, before we go ahead and get started, you know, go to our website, justicequestlive.com, and hit that like and follow button and donate if you're able to. We just go ahead and ask that, you know, we get some help with paying the bills here, and that we go ahead and so we can continue to bring you the word. And the word is what's going on in the world and tying it to the Bible and how God has gone ahead and said all this. Now, I believe it's the end times, okay? And I believe judgment is coming, and rather quickly. And you go to all sorts of scriptures, but Revelation is a big one, the book of Revelation. For those of you who don't believe in God, you know, and say you require proof, or just take a look around you. You know, do you think all this happened because of a big bang? You know, how many different types of maple trees do we have? You know, how many different types of pine trees do we have? You know, if evolution was real, you know, I could buy the fact that, you know, a simple moss might be forming, or pond scum, you know, but I doubt it. But not the different varieties of life, both the plant and animal that we have is just unbelievable. So anyway, it goes ahead and begs a higher order of being. Now, if you want to go ahead and look at it in a practical way, you know, you take a big lump of steel about the size of this desk, and you wait for, you know, 10 billion years for it to pass, and it will still be a lump of steel. It will not have formed itself into a car. Higher intelligence designed that lump of steel into a car, with all the intricacies and how it runs and how it does it. Same thing with our bodies. God designed our bodies, all right, and that's it. But anyway, let's get back to the Senate and the House of Representatives oath of office. And this is a continuation of Monday. In fact, we're going to continue on this subject all week long, because I've got a thing here. Well, I'll get to that here in a minute. But the oath of office for the Senate and the House of Representatives says, I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter, so help me God. That "so help me God" is the key phrase there. You are taking this oath of office before God. So, and you're asking God to help you. Well, a lot of our representatives and past presidents have not gone ahead and done that too well. Now, we've covered everything here, but, you know, I subscribe to a new magazine, and I'm not going to tell you the name of it, but I spent a couple hours reading it last night. Oh, did I just do that? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, but yeah. Let's see. But I started reading it, and it blasts everybody, and they measure everything as per the Constitution. So the Constitution is not a living document. In other words, it's not a living document that you can assign whatever you want to its meaning. All right. And apply words that aren't in it, like separation of church and state. That's nowhere in the Constitution. We covered that on Monday. But anyway, in this magazine, we got a letter from the editor-in-chief. Those who sincerely believe that this is a recipe for creating a better America fail to understand that a government big enough to give the people everything they want is also big enough to take from them everything they have. Yeah, we're starting to see that, including their freedom. Why are they after the Second Amendment? Because once the Second Amendment falls, the rest of them will fall like dominoes. That punishing producers via confiscatory taxation or nationalization will destroy the incentive to produce, resulting in less wealth to share. And in that practice, socialism is not about sharing the wealth, it is controlling the wealth. Yeah, that's what socialism is. I don't care what they say. They're going to go ahead and put propaganda in it to however they can to put it in a favorable light. Socialism failed in Cuba. Socialism failed in the Soviet Union. I mean, that collapsed. It just could not sustain itself. Eventually, you run out of other people's money. End of story. So you got to come up with it yourself. Fortunately for our government, we have the press. When we're running out of money, we just crank up those presses and crank out more money. All right. He goes on to say this ignorance is particularly alarming about among the young. A new poll released on July 2nd by the Cato Institute found that nearly half of, or 46% of Americans and nearly 2/3, 61 of Gen Z don't know when America's 250th commemorates. Really? Well, who can you blame that on? Let's go. Let's see. People who can't read and write. Wouldn't that be the Department of Education? Aren't they in charge of teaching people to read and write? I read an article, a news article here. Just in this past week that there was a poll that states that 89% of American Black males cannot read functionally. A higher percentage of them can't write. College professors have got to spend new students, teaching them how to read critically in order for them to grab onto the material. People, if we don't change this system around that we have, we're in big trouble. Gen Z stands out with more who are supportive of socialism than capitalism. All right, 53 to 45%. America's great political divide is most evident in the war of words between the two major political parties, but even inter-party fractures are apparent. For instance, President Donald Trump blasted Representative Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, for being disloyal to him and the GOP. In a Truth Social post, he claimed that Massie never votes for us, he always votes with Democrats. He also successfully campaigned to get Massie defeated in his primary. Yet in our latest Freedom Index, which rates all members of Congress based on the Constitution, Massie scored 100%. How can that be? To shed light on that question, we ask you to delve into the Freedom Index to decide for yourself if Massie and the other members of Congress got the scores they deserve. I'll get to that in a minute. Regarding Trump specifically, we ask that you carefully read our cover stories, Principles, Not Personalities, which argues that we should assess Trump and all other politicians based on their adherence to principles. Yeah, That's the reason I was a Trump supporter. When the debate was going on with Hillary Clinton, he went ahead and he said that if I were president, you'd be in jail. And and the room erupted. Yeah, we're all looking for that. We're looking for the government to hold people accountable that are committing crimes instead of sheltering them and covering up. I mean, doggone, how many crimes have we got Hillary Clinton on? We got her on Uranium Gate. We got her on Russia Gate. We got her on Server Gate. We got her on a whole bunch of other crimes, not to mention kidnapping children from Haiti to sell into sexual slavery. Yeah. So we go ahead and we vote on principles. That is the reason you ran on balancing the budget. Yet your latest, well, I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, we go on and on and on. And it goes on here in principles, not personalities. But how conservative is the Republican Party? How conservative is it with President Donald Trump as a standard bearer? One measuring stick shedding light on this question is the new American Freedom Index, which rates every member of the U.S. House and Senate based on the Constitution. According to this metric, Republicans as a whole score well compared to their Democratic counterparts, but poorly with respect to their oaths of office to the Constitution. Yeah, that's what we just got talking about. Oaths. When you have a gun control bill coming up, all you got to do is say, hey, you know what? Second Amendment. Nope. End of story. Down. We're sending hundreds of billions of dollars overseas. Nope. End of story. We can stop that. But you know what? Right now we have trillions of dollars being spent on illegal immigrants. All right. And some court somewhere, and I remember reading this, is saying that you cannot touch entitlements. Once it's there for life. End of story. So basically, it's the courts that forced us into this deficit. And we have politicians that get elected by promising us more and more and more and more. Well, you know what? It's just going to come back to bite us in the butt. And it already is. This is what I'm saying is we go ahead and keep cranking out that press. Yeah, that money press. Yep, we need another 20 billion. Let's crank her up. Yeah. China has been dumping U.S. debt quietly over the last 10 years. You know what? Because our credit rating has been lowered. I mean, the article goes into a lot more here, and I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go through this issue point by point. And it says the liberal left, on the other hand, has maligned him as a racist, anti-Semite, neo-Nazis, etc., who aspired to become a modern-day Hitler. No, that's not true. Who supports abortion? All right, Trump or the Democrats? The Democrats. Who supports taking away our gun rights? Trump or the Democrats? Yep, Democrats. You can go ahead and say everything that Hitler stood for, the Democrats are for. So who are the real fascists here? Most people in the United States have no idea who Antifa is. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now what Antifa is anti-fascist. It was gone ahead and developed by the Democratic Party. They're talking about conservatives being the fascists. Yeah. You want something? You buy it and you pay for it. You work for it. There's a well-known proverb warns that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah. We all heard this. Hillary Clinton at one point was going ahead and say, we have to do this for the children, so our children will grow up, and that was all sorts of bad legislation come down that, So it comes down to, these things are all well and good. They may paint them up with a good, wrap it up in a nice, neat, pretty bundle. All right. But what it comes down to is, let's take a look at what's going on further on down the road. When I was alderman of our town, when the mayor comes to one of the other aldermen went ahead and said, well, we got to go ahead and do this for the children, And I looked at him, I said, you know what, I'm getting sick and tired of hearing about this. I did not think I would hear this in Donkey Butt, North Dakota, but here I am. I said, just because Hillary Clinton said doesn't make it a good thing. Yeah, I am mad. I am tired of being polite. I am tired of being reasonable. All right. We've got enemies surrounded, wanting to destroy this country from within, and we've got countries on the outside looking and drawing up plans for when America fails, when America falls. Yeah, well, we're falling from within. If we don't do something about this, and I'm going to get to the Supreme Court rulings here in a minute, or maybe not. Maybe we'll wait that till the Friday. But we've got a lot to cover today, so we're going to be handling this. Oh boy. All right. On the left, the hatred against Trump has become so virulent that it's hardly hyperbolic to observe that many liberal left Americans have Trump derangement syndrome, a phrase, condition that has been part of the political lexicon landscape ever since Trump came down the escalator to announce his bid for the presidency in 2015. TDS victims hate Trump to such an extent that they irrationally reject whatever he says or does simply because he says or does it, even in cases where they might otherwise agree. Yeah, immigration is one of them. Even Hillary Clinton said we got to stop the illegal immigration. Well, Trump did it. Now the left is going berserk. Yeah. You can go and apply anything to it, but I read somewhere here that the Democratic Party has become the party that hates America. Yeah, if you notice in Congress, nobody wears the American flag on the Democratic side. Nobody. Republicans used to doing it, and then Democrats went ahead and did it too, just because it was a fashionable thing to do, and they didn't want to be seen as anti-American. Now they're being brazen about it. That's unbelievable. Nevertheless, we should always evaluate our politicians based on principles, not personalities and not parties. Yeah, exactly. Principles are immutable, whereas personalities imperfectly represent those principles. All of us are flawed human beings, all right, maybe corrupted by power, maybe deceptive. And political parties can and do change. Yeah, when I first became a voting age, I became a Democrat. And my neighbor gives me a hard time about it. But I like to say I'm a recovering Democrat, just like I'm a recovering Catholic. Yeah. And I'll tell you the reason I left the Democratic Party back in the early 80s when Ted Kennedy came out and said that he was in favor of equal rights for homosexuals. I said, well, so it begins. And I said, I'm going Republican from now on. And I have. For a brief time, I left it in favor of the Constitutional Party, but they never got any traction. So my name was gone ahead and fronted by several people on our forum that I hung out at, and they just said, "Oh, well, who is he?" They never heard of me, so I said, "Well, never mind." Okay, and let's see. let's go ahead and talk about Trump. All right, he's doing a lot of good things out there, but he's also doing some things that are not quite so good. Trump's war with Iran. I agree with the war with Iran, but he should have gone to Congress and asked for a declaration of war. Iran, the short story is they're holding up the Strait of Hormuz and charging tolls for going through the Strait of Hormuz. All right, which it's international waters, most of it. Your national boundaries only go like 12 miles from shore. End of story. The center of it is international waters. So you can come and go as you please per world treaty. All right. But they were sitting there charging tolls for going through the Strait of Hormuz. They are also exporting terrorism all over the world. Which part of this don't you understand? Every president since Reagan has gone ahead and said, we got to do something about Iran. Iran. Nobody ever did. Trump said, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. And that's something else is, Congress has not the American people at heart. They're being run by the New World Order, the United Nations. World Economic Forum, whoever you want, whatever name you want to go ahead and assign to them. Trump launched a war against Iran on February 20th without first asking Congress to declare war as required by the Constitution. That's all he had to do. All right. But then again, you'd have had idiots coming out there saying, like, I actually voted for the war before I voted against it. Yeah. John Kerry. Napoleon once said, where is that? Being stupid is almost a requirement of being in politics, but I'll get to it. I got it underlined. All right, Trump assigned tariffs. He started the trade war. Okay, yep, let's do it. Money was rolling in. Now he's got to give all that money back because Congress didn't have the courage to do what was necessary. All right. These countries have been taking money from the United States taxpayer for years. We built tariffs. We paid to China. We built, all right, China's infrastructure and military that we're going to have to go ahead and face the military one day in the future. I will guarantee that. I don't agree. I agree with the tariffs, but I don't agree with the way he did it. All right. He should have gone to Congress and forced the issue. Here's another thing. I said this before, is we go to war. Our job is to kill things and break things, not kill people and break things, not go ahead and rebuild the country afterwards. All right. But here in point 6 of the Memorandum of Understanding, the United States undertakes with regional partners to develop a definitive, mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion in U.S. denomination for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran. No. The way I heard it is that money was going to be coming from surrounding states. Man, getting back to tariffs for a second, in fact, one thing that most people don't realize is tariffs were once the primary way by which Congress funded the federal government. It was a good case could be made that tariffs are the least objectionable form of taxation. Yeah. If you've got 2 cars sitting side by side, one of them's American made, all right, costs $13,000, let's say. But you got another one that's imported from, let's say, pick a country, Uganda, but it's cost $7,000 more, right? $20,000, Which one, you want to go ahead and spend 20,000 or 13,000? Yeah, that's how America went ahead and signed over this right, back in I don't know when, but I'll have to go ahead and get that to you. On June 13th of 2020, he told the graduating class at West Point, we are ending the era of endless wars. Yeah, you know what? My solution is simple. We're no longer needed to be the policemen of the world. In fact, a lot of people are taking that for granted. It's about time we pull in our tentacles. Yeah, go ahead and get rid of them. Why do we have to be in so many countries? Get rid of them. All right. Say, you know what? If you don't like us, we be out of here. We went ahead and we went over to South Korea. We were asking some of the South Koreans, do you want us to be here or not? And she goes, well, we'd rather you leave. I said, well, fine, we can leave. That'll leave you at the mercy of North Korea. And they do not, and I say, do not go ahead and take dissent lightly. So, I'm saying let's pull them in, get rid of them all. We don't get us out of the UN, get us out of NATO, end of story. You want to cure terrorism and stop terrorism, let's go ahead and get rid of USAID. Let's go ahead and quit sending money to the Taliban, $40 million a month. Yeah, we're funding terrorism. I covered that in an earlier segment. All right. We are ending the era of endless wars. In its place, a renewed, clear-eyed focus on defending America's vital interests is not the duty of U.S. troops to solve ancient conflicts in faraway lands that many people have never heard of. We are not the policemen of the world. For 4 years later, he gave his election night victory speech after winning his second term. He recalled, we had no wars. 4 years we had no wars, except that we defeated ISIS. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. Yet his second term, he joined Israel to start a war against Iran. That war has arguably been going on already. They're funding terrorism. We got the war on terror. That's been going on for since 2003, 23 years now. Come on now. Either you want this war to continue, or you're not letting your intelligence agencies do their job. One of the two. All those hippies that are in Congress right now, those ex-hippies, all right, who are against the war, who are against profiteering, who are social, they discovered that the United States military industrial might is a big cash cow. Yeah. So I disagree with this article on that. In the case of the release of the Epstein files, Trump sounded supportive of releasing the file during his 2024 presidential bid, but strongly opposed the release after he got back into the White House. However, he finally supported the release when it became obvious that the Epstein File Transparency Act would be passed by Congress. In June 2024, when Fox News asked him if he would declassify the Epstein files, he said that he would. But on July 16, 2025, he called the Epstein files a hoax. I remember that. He even blasted into his past supporters for buying into it in a lengthy Truth Social post. President Trump released the files. If we have people in our government that are going ahead and have taken advantage of this and gone ahead and committed rape and other atrocities to these people on Epstein Island, we need to find out about it. All right. If we see a thief and say nothing, then we put then we're guilty with them. Yeah. I am here calling out, if we need to find out, this is what our Department of Justice is for. This is what the FBI is for. All right. Taking Trump's cue on against releasing the Epstein files, congressional Republican blocked the Epstein files Transparency Act until Representative Massey was able to get a majority of House members to sign a discharge position, forcing the bill to the House floor for a vote. Trump abruptly reversed his position on the bill, which passed overwhelmingly in both houses of Congress, and signed it into law on November 19, 2025. Yeah. Let's see. National debt limit is supposed to be, but he went ahead in his big beautiful bill. All right. Yeah. Let's go ahead and look at that. The big beautiful bill. The debt limit has not been scrapped. Instead, on July 25th, 2025, Trump signed into law legislation that, among myriad of other things, raised the debt limit $5 trillion to $41.1 trillion. That legislation was, you guessed it, his big beautiful bill. You know what? Surprisingly, I went ahead and tried to find the text of the big beautiful bill online. I couldn't find it. I found the SAVE Act the other day. All right, but like everything else, if they don't want you to read it, they don't put it online to where you can read it. You got to pass it to read it. Not surprising. Yeah, that's one thing Trump picked up from Hillary Clinton. Not surprisingly, Trump did not draw attention to the $5 trillion debt limit increase when he was working to garner public support for the bill, nor did he trumpet the bill's spending provisions. Instead, he emphasized the bill's tax cut provisions, and anyone who dared oppose his big, beautiful bill was besmirched as opposing tax cuts. Yeah. Well, you know what? $39 trillion, $39.4 trillion. Yeah, which part of that don't you understand? We cannot, okay, if I'm making $50,000 a year, all right, and I'm in debt, $1 billion, $1 billion, there's no way I'm going to pay that back. Eventually the bank's going to come calling. This is what's happening. This is why the creation of Federal Reserve was such a big mistake. We sold out our national treasure, our gold and silver, to a private bank. Now we're paying interest on dollars that don't really exist. Yeah. Wow. And it goes on and on and on, June 30th, 2025, White House press release propagandized in the headlines, one big beautiful bill slashes deficits and national debt while unleashing economic growth. Yeah, but if the bill were honestly intended to slash annual deficits and national debt as promised, then why did it include a provision to raise the national debt limit by $5 trillion? Wow. In a previous episode, I went ahead and compared seconds to days and years, and 1 million seconds was about 11 days, I think is what it was. 1 billion seconds was 33 years. That's how much it increases. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. If you can't go ahead and grasp that figure, people, I just can't go ahead and say enough about it. You know, we've got to go ahead and it's about time we go ahead and take control of our budget. You know, we've got to go ahead and quit asking the taxpayers to pay more and more and more. And about time the taxpayers start asking, where's the money we're already sending you? You know, $2 trillion. I guess we're sending in $2 trillion a quarter or something like that. I'm not quite sure what the number is, but where's that money going? It's to service the debt. And we can't get rid of that because some liberal court ruled that once the entitlement's in place, you can't get rid of it. Yeah, we're paying now to go ahead and pay for illegal aliens to live in this country, you know. Wow. American energy policy, you know, they go ahead and yeah, here's here's another article. UN claims all must fight climate change. Yeah, well, you know what? They changed it from global warming to from global cooling to global warming to climate change. Now it encompasses everything. At a glance, climate alarmism is still being used as rationale for global governance. Yeah. We're going to go through a few of these provisions. The World Court ruled ICJ, International Court of Justice. That's what it stands for. Declaring that governments are legally obligated to support climate change. All right. That said that the World Court ruled last year that governments have a legal duty to fight climate change. No, we don't. You know, this year, you know, once you go in, at least be honest about it. You know, you're just looking to seize control over everything. This year, the UN General Assembly voted to give this ruling real force. Yeah, there we go. That's why get us out of the UN. You know, get us out of NATO, get us out of everything. We don't need to be sending hundreds of billions of dollars to the UN every year when they vote against us every time. The UN's climate agenda is another reason to get the US out of the UN. Boy, did I just say that? Yeah, so anyway, the International Court of Justice declared that governments are legally obligated to combat climate change. Really? Look into my eyes. Do you see one speck of care and concern? You know, you've got China that is pouring coal into the atmosphere, coal dust in the atmosphere like there's no tomorrow. They're exempt all of a sudden, you know. But the United States has got to go ahead and do it. We've got the cleanest air on the planet because of EPA regulations. Let's see. In one of its most breathtaking rulings, the ICJ, also known as the World Court or the World Supreme Court, ruled July 23rd, 2025, that all governments have a legal duty to protect human rights and fight global warming by restricting emissions of carbon dioxide. Officially, it was advisory, but on May 20th this year, the governments of the world acting to the UN voted to give it real force. You know, I'm a big Star Wars fan. And in the latest trilogy, you know, Luke Skywalker is telling Kylo Ren that everything you said in that statement was wrong. Everything in this statement was wrong, and I'm going to dissect it for you. The World Supreme Court ruled that all governments have a legal duty to protect human rights and, human rights. Let's stop right there. And I'm going to, whose job it, UN's job is to ensure human rights? That's UN's job is to ensure that genocide and oppression happens. And I'm going to tell you why. I watched a thing on the Discovery Channel that many years ago. In fact, I made a recording of it, and I go ahead and play it every once in a while just to keep myself fresh in what it was saying. But back during the 90s, all right, the Ivory Coast was having a problem with terrorism. They couldn't get their businesses of oil and gold and everything else. These warlords moved in and they took over everything, and they were using it to finance their own operations, and the government couldn't do it. They didn't have the resources to do it. So they went ahead and they brought in a army for hire called Executive Outcomes out of South Africa. And they got a contract with Executive Outcomes to go ahead and say, take care of this. And within 2 days, I mean, they had seized control of everything. They routed out these terrorists and warlords and took control of everything else. And they stayed on site to keep for security reasons. Well, you know what? That kind of caused an outrage in a small uproar in the United Nations. And the United Nations pressured, guess who? Bill Clinton, to go ahead and pressure Ivory Coast to rescind the contract. Okay. Now, Executive Outcomes left the Ivory Coast. All right. They went back to parts unknown. The warlords came back in and the genocide continued on. Yeah, it was a disaster. You name me one time the UN went ahead and went in there and tried to prevent disaster. It didn't happen. In fact, the terrorists know this so well that when they go ahead and prepare their fighting positions, they prepare them around the UN encampments so that, they're using them as human shields. Yeah. And, that kind of gives you a new take on the Mike New case. Back from the 80s even, so officially it was advisory, but on May 20th this year, the governments of the world acting through the UN voted to give it real force. Yeah, okay, so basically we're under the jurisdiction of the UN. Get us out of the UN now. President Trump, you went ahead and said you'll be watching very carefully. I do not see any action on this. Oh, you only got about 15 minutes to go, but you know what? We might run a few minutes overtime on this one. And I still have no comments up there. So anyway, ICJ President Yuri Iwasawa, I guess that's Japanese, painted an apocalyptic picture. Man-made global warming is supposedly an existential problem of planetary proportions, imperiling all forms of life. Oh, come on. States must cooperate to meet emission targets, phase out fossil fuels, and provide climate justice reparations to poorer nations. Everybody's coming to the United States saying, I want reparations. I want reparations. I want reparations. You know what? Again, I hate to say it. Look into my eye. Do you see one speck of care and concern about your reparations? Man, oh man. This is unbelievable. We're talking about, all right, Yeah. Okay. At least Trump is pushing, and experts are pushing back. Instead of just saying get out of the United States and get us out of the UN. Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and this is Basic Biology 101. All right. I'm going to go ahead and read it. The Trump and experts are pushing back. The Trump administration has been a wrecking ball to the climate movement. Indeed, it has withdrawn from numerous UN climate agreements, including the 1992 treaty, the aforementioned UFCCC that underpins the whole UN climate regime. I don't think that was a treaty. I think that was an accord. Speaking to the UN, the president himself ridiculed the climate narrative as the greatest con job in history, which it is. And I'll get to that in a minute. The administration is also ending domestic assault on CO2, including many of the regulations on energy production. Trump's Environmental Protection Agency is even reversing the Obama-era endangerment finding, claiming that CO2, the gas exhaled by all living creatures, is pollution that must be regulated. Did you catch that? I want to make sure that you heard this. The administration is also ending the domestic assault on CO2. That's CO2, what we breathe out. Including many of the regulations on energy production. Trump's Environmental Protection Agency is even reversing the Obama-era endangerment finding, claiming that CO2, the gas exhaled by all living creatures, is pollution that must be regulated. What are they going to do? Keep us from breathing? Legal experts and skeptics immediately pushed back on the UN's climate ruling too. Astrophysicist Dr. Willie Soon, a leading voice debunking climate alarmism, called the decision a joke at cosmic proportion. Here's where we get back to Biology 101. All green things use CO2 to breathe, to create oxygen. If we go ahead and limit the CO2s, plants are going to starve. We'll have a browning down. But I am amazed at the amount of people that so glom onto this. It's stupid. As in Ephesians 4:14 said, that we no longer be children tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine by the craftiness of men. Yeah, this is it. The left has gone ahead and glommed onto the climate change thing as a way to bring in socialism, bring in a new world order. All right. The book Red Hot Lies, and I'll go ahead and say that. I ordered that book and I found it fascinating. This is junk science at its best. All green things need CO2 to live. Yeah, they produce oxygen as a byproduct. There's more trees in Canada that produce oxygen than the world could ever produce in CO2. Never mind, your front lawn, your back lawn, the trees you got growing there, they produce CO2. Yep. People, yeah. People used to say, talk to your tomato plants or talk to your plants if you want them to grow. Yeah, the plants go ahead and absorb that CO2 while you're talking to them, and it makes them healthier. Junk science. This is what junk science at its best. All right, this was the two examples I'm going to give you were precursors to this. Remember the eggs are all cholesterol scare? Yeah, well, they weren't using eggs in the shell. They were using powdered eggs, which are just loaded with cholesterol. That food was paid for by, guess who? The breakfast food cereal makers. Yeah, most people ate eggs up until that time, all right? Another thing, we had to get rid of DDT because it was causing weak eggshells in bald eagles. Yeah, I said, weak eggshells, that kind of sounds like a calcium deficiency to me. I'm a farmer. I grew up on a farm. When we had to use to feed our chickens eggshells or oyster shells for the calcium content so that they would have strong eggshells, every farmer knows this. But yet we got rid of DDT, a cheap and effective pesticide. It eliminated, went to a long way to getting rid of malaria. It was invented at the time of the digging of the Panama Canal. We were losing too many troops to malaria. And it goes on and on and on, people. If the left has gone ahead and being blown about by 2 months ago was Queers for Palestine. Then it was lesbians against Trump. And then it was the anti-Iranian war thing. And it's like whatever they get their marching orders. That's what they glom onto. And we've got to stop this, people. If you do not know your Bible, you're going to be blown about by every wind of doctrine. All right. And this is all foretold, in Revelation. And in several other places in the Bible. You look at the prophecies of Ezekiel, Isaiah, he told about this. We got birthright citizenship as the next item and is the next article. Yeah, I was against this right from the get-go. We've got birthright tourism going on right now. Entire blocks in California where pregnant tourists come in there. They go ahead and download their baby. They get their birth certificate, show up at our borders a couple, 3 years later, said my son or daughter is a citizen of the United States. Yeah, that's got to stop. That's got to stop. Illegal aliens come across the border. They go ahead and download their baby. All right, end of story. No, that's not it. Immigration rules were set up by Congress many years ago. You know what? And then we've gone ahead and I got to slow down here. I'm getting all jumbled up. We have laws on the books already. We don't need new laws. We need to enforce the laws that are already there. That's what this big thing about ICE is, and I don't know. And that's another thing. And the left has glommed on to ICE is bad. Why? They're removing illegal aliens. Oh, we've heard the story about that. Oh, they're just here for a better life, blah, blah, blah. They're here to rape, pillage, and destroy. I read on the internet here, and I verified this case, so illegal alien, that was dumber than a box full of rocks, had a double-digit IQ back down the 50s. He was on there for committing a felony of some sort, and he was released by some liberal activist twit of a judge. 90 minutes after his release, he raped and murdered some girl. And back in jail again, probably to be released again. That judge should be jailed. She should be tried as accessory to murder. Well, we're coming up on an hour here. American citizen is not for sale. He wrote, Donald Trump, pointing to reports of billboards along our southern border advertising delivery packages starting at $4,000. Citizenship thrown in for the price. The Supreme Court's ruling is wrong. He declared now will be asking for a rehearing by the United States Supreme Court immediately. This miscarriage of justice will destroy America if they don't. You know what? For those of you who do not like Donald Trump, I said it would have been a lot worse if Hillary Clinton or the cackler, the chicken, Harris, got We would be so far down the road. We would be in a shooting civil war right now. And that's what Donald Trump, I think, is trying to prevent. That's what we here on the right are holding back for. We want something to be done legally before we take matters into our own hands. And believe it or not, a lot of us are getting pretty short-tempered. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it. We're at 11:55 here, and I still got. We're only covered halfway through this periodic, but I would go ahead and suggest that you all go ahead and get your subscription to it, because it's chock full of information. Oh boy. But we wrap up this program, we'll go ahead and say, go to justicequestlive.com. That's our website. Scroll down, hit that like and follow, and please go ahead and donate, please. We make no apologies here. We are Christians, warriors for God here, or at least I am. And I'm calling for the death penalty for anybody who goes ahead and goes against our country. There's a big thing about somebody was arrested for selling secrets to Iran on our war plans. And I'm thinking and they're wondering what to do with them. And I'm thinking doesn't treason apply? It seems like we're getting more and more confused on what to do. That's what God says, is you got to be strong. You got to be acquit yourself like men. Not become wimps. And again, I'll get back to the story of David when he slew Goliath. He didn't sit there and pray for him. He didn't let people say, don't make a scene, don't do anything. Let's just go ahead and back off and pray for him, blah, blah, blah. This is not. We are here to destroy evil. And I'm saying that we are here to destroy evil. Yeah, let's start doing it. We used to do that in this country. We don't anymore. And look at the result. We got lawlessness abounds. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say thank you for listening. Oh, we got a few comments here. Let's go ahead and, yeah, get the hell out of NATO. Take back our governments from all the terrorist politicians. Yeah, exactly. And that one says, yeah, God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Exactly. Thank you for your comments. You know what? And we have to go ahead and realize that, just because it's something new coming down the pike, and it's not really new, as God said in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and we'll see you again on Friday. Again, we're here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. So we go ahead and say thank you for joining us. Have a good day in the Lord, and you just go ahead and fear not, for the Lord is in control. Okay.